Before entry is authorized, each entry employer must prepare and post an entry permit at the entrance of a permit-required confined space. It is important for the authorized entrant, attendant, and entry supervisor to read the permit before working in or around the space. The entry supervisor must terminate entry and take the following action when any of the following apply. Cancel the entry permit when the entry permit operations have been completed, or suspend or cancel the entry permit and fully reassess the space before allowing re-entry when a condition that is not allowed under the entry permit arises in or near the permit space, and that condition is temporary in nature and does not change the configuration of the space or create any new hazards within it. And cancel the entry permit when a condition that is not allowed under the entry permit arises in or near the permit space. If the condition is temporary, it may be possible to suspend the permit to reassess the space and allow re-entry as stated previously. Any problems encountered during the entry operation must be noted on the permit. Permits must be retained for at least 1 year and used to review the program within 1 year of the permit entry. The program should be revised as necessary to ensure employees participating in entry operations are protected from permit space hazards. Employers may perform a single annual review covering all entries performed during a 12-month period. Entry permits must identify the space to be entered and the purpose, the date and length of time the permit is valid, the names of the authorized entrants, means of detecting an increase in atmospheric hazard levels in the event the ventilation system stops working, the personnel serving as attendant and current entry supervisor, the signature or initials of each entry supervisor who authorizes entry, the hazards of the permit space, the measures used to isolate the permit space and eliminate or control the hazards before entry, the acceptable entry conditions, results of initial and periodic tests performed, the rescue and emergency services that can be summoned and the means for contacting those services, the methods to maintain communications between the authorized entrants and attendants, equipment needed to perform the tasks such as PPE, testing equipment, communications equipment, alarm systems, and rescue gear. Any other information necessary, given the circumstances of the particular confined space, to ensure employee safety, and any additional permits required to perform work in the permit space, such as welding. Training plays a very important part of safety in confined spaces. Each employer is mandated to maintain a safe working environment. Employers must ensure that all authorized entrants understand the hazards in the permit space and the proper methods used to isolate, control, or in other ways protect employees from these hazards. It is important that employees not authorized to perform entry rescues be versed in the dangers of attempting such rescues. Training must establish employee proficiency in the duties required and must introduce new or revised procedures as necessary. OSHA requires employers to provide training in both a language and vocabulary that the employee can understand before assigning duties to employees pertaining to permit spaces, before changing employees' duties, when the permit space has new hazards, when the procedures change for the permit space, or when it is evident that an employee needs additional training. An employee who is authorized by the employer to enter a permit space, authorized entrants must know the hazards they may face during entry and how to properly use equipment required for entry. They must also maintain communication with the attendant in case of exposure to a hazard, and be able to alert the attendant when any warning signs of a dangerous situation or prohibited condition is recognized. Authorized entrants must exit from the permit space when the attendant orders an evacuation of the confined space, any warning signs of a hazard are recognized, a prohibited condition is discovered, or the evacuation alarm is activated. Employers need to provide at least one attendant outside the permit space to monitor the authorized entrance for the duration of the entry operations. Attendants may be assigned to more than one permit space. If attendant is monitoring more than one space, employers must include in the permit the means and procedures to enable the attendant to respond to an emergency affecting one or more of the monitored spaces. Attendants must know the hazards and potential hazards of the confined space and the behavioral effects of those hazards. Know how many authorized entrants are in a confined space and be able to identify each one. Remain outside the permit space during entry operations until relieved by another attendant. Continuously monitor and maintain communication with the entrants about the hazards that could be presented inside and outside the space. And contact rescue services as soon as they determine an entrant needs assistance with escaping. Warn unauthorized persons to stay clear of the confined space and advise the person to exit immediately if they have entered the permit space area. The attendant must then inform the entry supervisor and authorized entrants if any unauthorized person has entered the permit space. Be able to perform non-entry rescues as specified in your employer's rescue procedures, and not perform any additional duties that could interfere with the primary duty to monitor and protect the authorized entrants. There must be an entry supervisor for each permit-required confined space. The entry supervisor can monitor more than one space at a time. The duties of an entry supervisor include knowing the hazards of each confined space they supervise, including the mode, symptoms, and consequences of the exposure. Verifying that the proper entries have been made, as well as all the proper tests have been performed, and that all procedures and equipment required are in place and ready to use. Terminating the entry and canceling or suspending the permit. Confirming rescue services are available and the means for summoning them are operable. Confirming with the rescue service that they will notify the employer as soon as the rescue services become unavailable. Removing unauthorized individuals who enter or attempt to enter the permit space during entry operations. And determining entry operations remain consistent with terms of the entry permit and that the acceptable entry conditions are maintained. Emergency rescue service must be available and be able to respond in a timely manner. In the event the rescue service becomes unavailable, they must notify the employer immediately. Employee safety is a major concern during confined space entry. Emergency rescue should only be attempted by trained professionals, as deaths often occur during rescue attempts by fellow employees. The rescue service is to close off the area, get authorized entrance out of the space, and perform first aid as needed. Non-entry rescue is required unless the retrieval equipment would increase the overall risk of entry or would not contribute to the rescue of the entrant. A retrieval system or method must be used when non-entry rescue is selected. Emergency services must be confirmed and available in the event a non-entry rescue fails. The retrieval equipment must be in place before employees enter the permit space and allow for immediate rescue to begin as soon as rescue becomes necessary. One of the most important components of PPE in a confined space is a respirator. It is important employees understand the difference between various respirators and are using the proper one for the space and hazards associated with the space. It is important to fit test each piece of PPE. If a respirator is too loose or tight, it may allow toxins to be inhaled. A good fit feels secure around the chin, doesn't pinch the nose, doesn't slip, and allows the head to move. The respirator should be inspected before each use to make sure there are no cracks, holes, signs of wear, or loose connections. Respirators should be cleaned after each use. If a respirator is not cleaned or stored properly, it may not be capable of protecting the next wearer. Check with your employer about your company's respirator safety program and make sure you have been properly trained on the use of respirators. Other forms of PPE can include hard hats, safety glasses, clothing that protects the torso against chemicals, fires, and other hazards, as well as gloves and safety shoes that protect the hands and feet from various hazards. Confined spaces in the construction industry are a common hazard to workers and must be taken seriously. Never enter a confined space unless you are authorized to do so, and always have the proper PPE to enter the space. The OSHA mandates have been designed to serve as a guideline for employers and employees to follow prior to, during, and after entry into a confined space. Your training is important to your well-being, so take it seriously. It could save a life.